In the midnight hour, babe, she cried more, more, more. Little rebel, yeah, she cried more, more, more. I need more strings. In the midnight hour, babe, she cried more, more, more. Little rebel, yeah, she cried more, more, more. Little rebel, yeah, she cried more strings. Whoa! Yay! Rock and roll. How am I gonna keep up that energy for the rest of the video? Oh, well, I got strings for you at least. Good enough? Okay. Let's look at the code instead. All right, we're starting out by trying to max out the strings, and we're looking at the test string here, and I've set it to 65,530 because then we're in the ballpark of the maximum number of characters we can have in the string. Then we're going to check the different length functions here. We have one of them is length and the other one is size of string, but we're going to test the length function further down here because there's some Unicode things that you might want to be aware of. Because strings can come in many varieties and different character types and stuff like that, and we're also going to look at a little bit of that. But first of all, that in the different character sets sometimes have more numbers, or because every character is represented by a number. So sometimes two characters make up one character, and that is not in regular ANSI, but in Unicode. So we're going to see how these different length functions from the documentation, how they play out with a string with München in it, because this character here goes into multiple characters in Unicode. And we're looking at the trim string. So we're going to trim, we have some spaces around, and we're going to see what happens if we use the trim, left trim, and right trim. Then there is something special with this exclamation mark. It has an effect on a string only when it's written in the code, not if you have a string that comes in from a form or from some other input variable, something. But if you hard code a string with exclamation marks, you might run into some issues when using that string later on. And we're going to have a look at that, and this is how you avoid those issues. You use the character 33 instead. And then we come down to the ASCII value of a string, and here we could actually have done some more to see, for example, the German Ü, if we could get two numbers, or how would that work? It might be interesting to try. And then, but this one is only showing that you can get the ASCII value of a character, and then you can use that value and bring the character back like this. So these functions. Then we're going to look at converting between OEM and ANSI and UTF-8. And we have a few functions here. There are other ways to do this as well, where you can move data into a buffer and then convert the buffer. I encourage you to read more in the documentations. There are more things that you can look at there. Double quotes and single quotes is also an interesting topic when you talk about strings, because sometimes you want a single quote in your text, and other times you want a double quote. And when you write code, you can use them in kind of switch between them, but you need to pair them up. So you need to start with the same as you end. But if you want to use double quotes inside a text, you have to have single quotes around it. And if you want to use single quotes, you have to have double quotes around it. So you have to kind of play with that. It's not like a backslash or something that is common in other places. You can also use a semicolon in DataFlex, but that means that the lines continue on the next row. So this is how you would do that kind of string. It does not help if you just put it inside of the string like this, because then it is just part of the string. We also have the Newline characters that is really messing up things from time to time. And that's also when you have different systems like Linux or Windows. They use different number of or different sets of Newline characters. So you have Newline and you have character return, which is 13. Newline is 10. And we're gonna have just see how they behave when we play around with them. We also have a bunch of other string functions in DataFlex, and I've just picked a few of them that I wanted to play with. Looks like this one, overstrike here, has some kind of issue because it's not doing the same thing the documentation says it's doing when it is a minus here. So it might be that something has changed since they wrote the documentation, but yeah. Concatenating strings is also an interesting topic because you might have multiple strings that you want to set together to one string. And you can do that with plus, with minus, and star. And that have different implications. Plus just concatenate the string as they are. Minus removes all the spaces so that it's like doing a trim while concatenating. And a star makes sure that there's always one space in between. So if you have strings that don't have any spaces, then you can always use a star to make sure that there will be a space between them. I usually prefer to make sure that I have the space and then use plus, but I guess star is kind of useful as well in that sense. String manipulation, as always, nice when you want to play around with strings, and you have some insert, left, right, pos, and mod that you can do to manipulate strings. And here are some samples where we show what happens when we play around with those. You can also replace values in a string, and there you have two functions. One called replace that replaces the first one, and replaces with an S in the end that replaces all occurrences in a text. And then there is this eval, and in JavaScript you usually say that eval is evil. Maybe not so much in DataFlex, but you should still use it with care because it does work on some things and doesn't work on other things. And yeah, play around with it, try it if you want to use it. I do not really see a good use case for it, but I wanted to highlight it in this example anyway. Now, let's go over to our sample page to look at the code. So here, maxing out the string, we can see that length is counting up, and then all of a sudden it's counting down. 33 and then 32. So 32 is kind of the max. So for some reason, it seems like we're adding an additional character here that gets accepted when we do the count. But the next time when we add another character, it's reset to 32. So 32 is the 65,532 characters is the limit you can store in a regular string. If you want anything larger, then there are other options like a varchar or uchar array or something that you can play with. String length functions. Yeah, so let's see what happens when we run mentions. If we use len, it says undefined argument. And I'm not sure because I think I'm using it as it is in the documentation, but yeah, something seems to not be working here. Length is 7, and that checks out. Size of string says it's 8, and there you can see the Unicode character shows up and is counted as well. So that's why they created these string of W size, and the W means that it handles the Unicode characters. So it says 7 again. I think length is by default using this one because it's more accurate in most cases. Trim, we have this sentence here with a lot of spaces, and trim just removes all the spaces. Left trim, L trim removes them on the left, and R trim removes them on the right. Nothing strange there. The exclamation mark, that is actually adding a bunch of numbers or sometimes just a 0 into the string. It's some remnant from the macro language in DataFlex, and I have never used it myself. I don't really know how it works. So yeah, as I understand it, you should probably not write too much macros these days because we have a lot of things in the language that works and makes things easier to read and work with. This is the ASCII and character. So you can use these to get from the character to the ASCII number and from the ASCII number back to the character if you want to play with that. When converting a string, if we convert between UTF-8s and OEM and ANSI, we get some strange characters here for the U. But we can go from UTF-8 to OEM and back again, and it will work. We can go from UTF to ANSI and back. We can go from OEM to UTF-8 and back, and the same for ANSI and UTF-8. We cannot go from ANSI to UTF-8 and then to OEM, and we cannot go from OEM to UTF-8 and to ANSI. So we kind of need to figure out what character set we actually have as inputs before converting it. Double quotes and single quotes working. Code over multiple lines, yeah, with the semicolon, it's just working. So here we have a LF, it's a new line. Here we have a CR that also creates a new line. And here they are together. So in this case, they create 2 new lines. But if you work in some other editors, they might only create 1 line. So something to be aware of. And you have the history of new lines in this link here. Then we have our string functions. And if we take A, B, C, D, E, and just want to center 3 characters, then it will be the 3 first characters. It will put in a new string. If we have A, B, C, D, and 10, it will try to center that string within those 10 characters. So we'll have 10 blank lines, and then it will push in the text in the middle of that. So you have equal spaces on both sides. You can format numbers, so set how many decimals you want. You can do lowercase and uppercase of strings. Here's an overstrike function where you can set -4, for instance, and then it will. Does that work? So if you look in the documentation, you see that it actually says that -3, it removes 0, 1, 2, 3, and then pops from 5. So it should write from 5 here. But if we look in what it's actually doing, is just replacing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I was expecting 4, 5, 6 DEF. So it looks like something changed here as well. Overstrike 4 moves the new string to the 4th position and replaces or overwrites the text there. And overstrike 18 just creates a lot of spaces and puts the rest of the string there. Concatenating strings, you have first a sample of strings with no spaces around. And plus will keep the no spaces, minus obviously will not have any spaces, and star will add a space. And if you look here, we have a lot of spaces around, and plus will just keep the spaces, minus will remove the spaces, and star will reduce the spaces to 1. And I also did a test with more spaces to see if it reduces to 1. So that works. And then we have manipulating string functions. So we have insert B in AAAA on position 4. There you have that. You have left, which is just picking the leftmost characters. You have right, that picks the rightmost characters. You have pos, that gives you an integer on the position where the string is found in the main string. So CDE is found at position 3. And then we can do mid. And I count is set to 3 in this case. So mid A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 2 characters from this 3 gives us CD. So that works as a charm. That's really useful in many cases. Replace A with C gives us C, B, A, B, A. So it's replaced the first instance. And if we use replaces, it replaces everything. And eval, we can write a simple arithmetic function here, and it will calculate it for us. But if we do something more advanced, like using the center function, that's not working. So just be careful how you use it and what you put in there. As a rule of thumb, it's probably always good to not run eval on input from a user because you never know. I'm a bit curious to know more of what this eval actually can do, but I haven't really seen anything. There's not much in the documentation for at least. So that's all I had for you today. Hope you enjoyed, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe and all of that. So see you next time. Bye-bye.